So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to get a 520 plus on the MCAT. If you're trying to score a 520 plus on the MCAT, I want to start by saying something important. I did not start anywhere close to a 520. In fact, my first diagnostic test was at about a 500. And honestly, that score showed me that I had huge content gaps and significant work to do. About 4 months later, I was consistently scoring between a 520 to a 521 on AMC practice tests. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I did, the mistakes I avoided, and the 3 phases that took me from 500 to a 520 so that you too can do the same and ace the MCAT on exam day. If you're a pre-med student or high school student watching this and serious about getting to a top medical school, well then I invite you to book a discovery call with our team over at Ivy League Consults. Before I even start talking about my study plan, I want to mention that it's really important to take certain classes before starting the MCAT prep. Before I had started studying for the MCAT, I had already taken a few classes. I had already completed 2 general biology courses, a general chemistry course, an organic chemistry course, and then 1 biochemistry course. Now, I don't think psychology or sociology are absolutely necessary before studying. A lot of it could be self-taught, and I'll be linking down in the description a few study guides that I used throughout the process. But having these foundational courses helped make a huge impact in my studying, especially because it kept the material very fresh in my mind. So if you're planning your timeline, I'd strongly recommend having at least those core science courses in your study plan before seriously preparing for the MCAT. Now, the very first step that you're gonna do in your MCAT preparation is you're gonna take a diagnostic test. Now, this is the very first thing that I did. I actually took a blueprint diagnostic exam. And in this, my first score was a 500. Now, a lot of students get discouraged by a score like that, but honestly, this is exactly what a diagnostic is supposed to do. There is no need to make you feel good. It's there to identify the weaknesses. As soon as I got the score of a 500, it really told me 2 main things. Number 1 was that I had significant content gaps. And number 2 was that I needed a structured study plan. And that's exactly why I divided my study plan into 3 main phases. Now, the first phase was exclusively focused on content review. This is the very first phase. Now, because I had recently taken a lot of the prerequisite courses, I wasn't learning everything from scratch. Instead, I was refreshing and organizing information that I'd already seen. So, the first thing I did was I bought the Kaplan MCAT book set. I bought that set, and each day, I would go through each of the chapters of the Kaplan book, and I would focus on understanding major concepts rather than memorizing every single tiny detail. After I'd read every single chapter, I'd go and I'd make an Anki deck. I would then make an Anki deck so that I could go back and memorize all the key details that I would need for the MCAT test day. One mistake I see students make is spending months trying to read the content books without ever applying that information. And this is a mistake that I was very critical not to do. Even during the content review, I was already pairing my studying with practice questions. And this is where phase 2 comes in. Phase 2, and probably one of the most important phases, is going to be UWorld and question-based learning. So this is probably the highest yield part of my preparation. I purchased the UWorld subscription and started doing practice questions every single day. My goal was very simple. Every day, I would do about 40 different questions. And I would pair this with doing the Kaplan books. So if I was reading the Kaplan books for biology, I would do biology questions. If I was reading the Kaplan books for chemistry, I would do the chemistry questions. The key wasn't just answering these questions, it was going back and reviewing them. One thing you'll notice when you study for the MCAT yourself is that the MCAT rewards active learning far more than passive reading. Getting questions wrong and figuring out why they're wrong simply improves your score. So for me, content review and UWorld went hand in hand. So I wasn't reading the books, but I was constantly testing myself and doing question-based learning. And that third phase is going to be going through full-length exams and AMC material. Once I had built a very solid foundation through UWorld, through the Kaplan books, and through my prerequisite courses, I was almost ready for the final preparation, which is going through the AMC material. Now, I highly recommend saving this material for last because this is going to be the most indicative of how things are going to be on test day. What I did was I purchased the official AMC practice ranks and all of the practice tests and completed essentially every single one of them. And this is where I saw my scores started to jump significantly. I took the first AMC full length, and on that I had scored a 514. I went through, I reviewed it very consistently, and I took the second one a week after that, and I'd gotten a 518, so I saw a 4-point bump. I reviewed that, and I took the third one, and I got about a 520. So what I did was I had spaced out each week before my MCAT taking each of these exams. So what I mean with that is I would take one AMC exam, and then I would spend the entire week reviewing it very, very thoroughly, and then I would go ahead and take it the following week. So the biggest takeaway that I have from studying from the MCAT is that it is a reading comprehension test disguised as a science test. And so yes, you need a lot of content knowledge, and yes, you need to know the foundations, but once you're scoring above the 510 range, success becomes much more dependent on you understanding these passages, interpreting the data, identifying what the questions are asking, and avoiding the traps. And this is especially true for cars, which is one of the hardest sections that I had in making significant progress. And cars, I think, really was one of the hardest sections to improve for a few reasons. Number 1 is because it's really about repetition, practice, and careful review of your reasoning process. I knew that if I simply had misunderstood a question or misunderstood a passage, I would get, the entire section wrong for that particular cars passage. And so that's why I really try to distill each particular passage and my strategy far before even taking each car section on the MCAT. And so just to recapitulate what I had done before test day is I had completed all the AMC full-length exams. I had completed all the AMC CARS materials. I had completed all of the UWorld questions. Every time before each test, before each practice test, I'd go through all of my Anki flashcard decks, and I had done every single thing on the AMC resource. To give you my final advice, I think if I were to summarize my entire MCAT strategy, I would sort of say it would be 3 main points. I think number 1 would be to really build your content foundation with Kaplan or some other content resource. Have 6 months ahead of you ready to go. I think if you were to do it part-time, you may not achieve the same success. The MCAT requires full-time commitment for a matter of 4 to potentially 6 months. The second thing would be to do a lot of questions, especially every day. I think UWorld was really key for that, and I would constantly go back and review each of these mistakes. And then number 3, I would save all the AMC material to the end and treat it like gold. I think because there is such a limited amount of it, to make sure you're treating it very, very cautiously and very precisely each time you're doing it is very important. So therefore, I wouldn't touch it until it's towards the very end and you're fully ready for it. And finally, don't be discouraged by low diagnostic tests. You're not going to do very well in the first diagnostic test. I started off at a 500, but it didn't matter where you started, it mattered where you ended. And so I was consistently improving over the next few months, and I stayed disciplined, I reviewed my mistakes, and I trusted this process. And I saw a huge score increase by that final AMC test, getting about a 520. That is sort of the key information that I really want you to take away from this video. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your studying.